This is the lesson for ancient and medieval history for the 24th of March 2025. I am taking the unusual step of recording this because we have so many people out and we have an exam tomorrow, and I'm going to be talking about thesis statements for your thesis essay. First off, welcome. Second off, when you are preparing your case study 2, in addition to doing the profile, you have to do the essay. The essay is a structured essay of 16 paragraphs. So some of you did this voluntarily, but you didn't have to do it for case study 1. You have to do it for case study 2. So if you have your thesis packet, open it up. If you do not have your thesis packet, then imagine and write along with me. I've got a few extra ones over here, but not enough for everyone to replace theirs. Now, you've done the profile before, so I see no real reason to do that again. You've done it, you understand it, but the essay is this. It says, Case Study Essay, revised June 14th, 2023. And here, if you want to take a screenshot, is the first page, and here is the second page of the thesis essay. So, what you're going to write for each paragraph, see the top line next to the title of the paragraph, thesis, first major argument, rationale, and so forth. You're going to write a paragraph title. A paragraph title, as if it was the chapter of a book. Each paragraph gets a title, and the title is, what is it about? So, if you don't have titles on every single one of your paragraphs, this will not pass muster. So you've got to have titles on all of your paragraphs. Now, the title basically is what you list for your outline. So when you're outlining this, if you go 1 or 2 pages before, you can see where it says worksheet, case study, essay, strict outline format. And you are doing a strict outline. You are not writing from the hip. You are not just innovating. This is not creative writing. So the thesis is, what will the paper say, argue, or propose? What will be your overall point? And if you have a good thesis, everything else will follow into place. And if you have a bad thesis, you're going to be screwed up from the get-go. So here's what I recommend as a thesis. This is the structure of a thesis statement using 2 possible ways of going about it. Blank was more effective than blank at blank because of blank. Oh, I didn't write because of on the top there. Because of blank. So, Hitler was more effective than Stalin at organizing his country for war because of his personal nature. Or you could argue that Stalin was more effective than Hitler at organizing his country for war because of his personal nature. Now, you're not World War II specialists, but here's how it would work. I'm going to use the Stalin was better than Hitler. You know why? Stalin won. The Soviet Union with America and Britain won World War II. Hitler lost. So that's sort of an indication that Stalin was more effective than Hitler at organizing his country for war because of his personal nature. Hitler saw himself as an artiste. He was an artiste, a political artiste. He had been a painter and a wannabe architect, and now he had a chance to paint with the populations of nations. He had to paint with the policies of his ideology. And when Hitler painted, he used his intuition and his emotion, and then he retreated. and like a spoiled artist, basically kept away from the world until his sensibilities and sensitivities returned, and then he went back. So Hitler was an artist. Stalin was a workhorse. Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, worked harder than anyone around him for decades. That's how he got control over the Soviet Union. If there were lousy, cheap jobs that had no glory in them, give it to Stalin. He'll do it. He'll do all that grunt work stuff. And by doing all that grunt work stuff, Stalin was able to know all the details that he needed to know in order to take control of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and he was able to place his people in key positions. Stalin was the hardest worker of all. Hitler was an artist. Who do you think is going to win? In a struggle between the two, the hard worker wins out. The artist, for all of his inspiration, is lazy. And Hitler personally was lazy, not well organized. So there is one way of describing it in modern terms. You could also do a different kind. And by the way, I hope you're paying attention because I'm telling you how to write your thesis statement for me and for this project coming up. The second is your first comparable was more effective at the area of action than your second comparable because of why. It's a similar basic idea. So, Napoleon the general, or Julius Caesar the general. We're in ancient history, we'll do Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was more effective at warfare than politics because of his training, his nature, his mindset. You could also argue Augustus was more effective at politics than at warfare because of it. So actually, I have this bottom one wrong. It should be your first comparable here and your second comparable here. What I'm trying to get at with all this fancy schmancy stuff is this. The way to do a thesis statement in this course is to compare two things in an apples to apples, oranges to oranges sort of way. Compare them in ways that are comparable. So comparing Hitler and Stalin, or comparing Julius Caesar as a general or a politician, or Augustus Caesar as a general or a politician, these are apples to apples comparisons. You can look at Caesar's generalship. You can look at Caesar's political life. Caesar's generalship intimidated the Britons and the Germans and brought Gaul into the empire. Caesar's politics got him killed. And his attempt to be king failed. Augustus was seasick in his cabin when the Battle of Actium was fought. He let Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa run his fleet for him. But Augustus establishes the second Rome by establishing the Roman Empire so effectively that until Diocletian, the Augustus system works well enough. And even after Diocletian, elements of the Augustan compromise still play out until the fall of Western Empire. So whatever your topic is, you're going to find ways of comparing it, comparing one aspect of it to another, or comparing it to another similar type person. Does anyone wish to ask about their particular one? And I'll try to spitball it. What is your topic? And I will suggest a case study.
The 100 Years' War.
Okay. In the 100 Years' War, Britain was more effective than France, or France was more effective than Britain at prosecuting the war because. You should write this down. Even if you don't choose it, you can use what I'm saying just anywhere. Even if you don't choose to use my suggestion, you could find things in it that are worth writing. So, in the 100 Years' War, the French, because they won, were more effective than the British at prosecuting the war because the French were more effective at prosecuting the war than the British because. You got it? You see how that works? What you'll be doing is you'll be comparing British victories like Crécy and the great Henry V victory at, 14, Agincourt. versus the French victories at Orleans and elsewhere. And you'll be looking at who does better at winning the war, right?
Did you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah. In the Hundred Years' War, the French were more effective than the British at organizing at prosecuting the war because, and you have to come up with some basic answers there. Okay? I'll take two others. Yes.
Spanish.
Okay. It's almost similar. In the Reconquista, do I do that Spanish art? I'm proud of that. Oh yeah, fine. Just say no. It's así. Fine. I'm not a Spanish speaker, so I take what pleasure I can in my petty little R because I don't normally roll my R's. So okay, in the Reconquista, down. I say it wrong. The Christians were more effective than the Muslims because it's a simple thing. And if you want to focus on a particular event, El Cid was the most effective of the mercenary knights because. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you have a counter idea that might make it better? Okay. So again, this isn't rocket science. This is very, very, very straightforward. Yeah.
The Viking monastery raids?
The monasteries. Let me think for a moment. The attempt to hide treasure in island and coastal monasteries failed. Oh, no. Okay. But one basic approach is the Vikings attacked the monasteries because they were weak and undefended and very, very rich. So why did that attempt by the British and the English and the Irish to put their treasures in these monasteries on the islands fail? Why did that fail? That would be a question. And you could say that the attempt by the islanders to guard their treasures in monasteries failed because of this and this. That's not a comparison of this more than this. Well, the two reasons that it failed was, number one, the Vikings came by sea. Nobody expected an attack to come by sea. And the British expected the holiness of the monks to protect them. And the Vikings were pagans, and they just saw these skirt-wearing men as easy targets. So do you see, can you build something out of that?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw your hand, and I saw your hand, and I'll do those quick. Go.
Okay, so mine is about Norse polytheism, but more specifically comparing Norse and the Greco-Roman.
Yeah. So what you would argue is the Norse were less influenced by the Olympians because, or the Norse were more influenced by the Olympians. And in either way, your thesis is going to rest on this. Were the Norse gods mere reflections of the Greco-Roman gods? I think the answer is no, but that's an arguable point. So your thesis could argue that the Norse gods were, in effect, just reflections of the Olympians, or you could argue that despite superficial similarities, the Norse gods were fundamentally different. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I had a suggestion for Lydia, but I'm
Please.
not sure if we can even do it.
Give it a try.
Be able to compare the Vikings sacking the monasteries to
the Huns.
with that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. No, the Vikings were more effective than the Huns or the Magyars or any other land attacking barbarians. You rock because of blank. That's great.
So you can compare
Yes.
the subject
To another subject. Absolutely you can. Absolutely you can. Yeah. So what she said to those of you at home was the Vikings were more effective at plundering than the Huns or the Magyars who came by land because. And it probably has something to do with them coming by sea. Good. Last one. Diego. Vlad the Impaler. Well, there are a couple of ways you can go with this. One is comparing Dracula to Dracul. Vlad the Impaler's father was also a great warlord. but they did different things to protect their lands from the Turks. So you could argue that Vlad's father was more effective than Vlad because, or Vlad was more effective than his father because the cruelty would play a part. Or you could argue this. In his time and place, Vlad the Impaler's cruelty was absolutely essential to Romanian victory, or Hungarian victory, however you want to call it. In his time and place, Vlad's cruelty was absolutely essential to his success because of the time and place, because of the respect people had for vicious violence. Does that make sense? Okay. So, if you have further questions, let me know. But the structure is you have your thesis, and your thesis is supported by two legs. Argument 1 and argument 2. Those are your Roman numerals. Each Roman numeral is supported by two legs. Supporting detail A and supporting detail B. And each supporting detail is supported by two facts. Fact data 1 and fact data 2. So we have facts and data 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 8 facts or data. Those should be from citation, from information, sources like that. And they support 4 supporting details. They support 2 prime arguments, which support 1 thesis. Now here's the example. On the page right before the thesis, you have an essay written by me, and the thesis is Godzilla is a much bigger threat to human civilization than King Kong. And you'll see that each paragraph has a title, and that title is connected to the place it played, the role it plays in the outline, right? So let's look at King Kong's characteristics for argument 1. Kong's special attacks. Well, Kong is enormous, and he has enormous strength to grab and smash. So King Kong punched a subway car off its rails in the 1930s. He ripped up through a subway track to punch the subway car. He's picked up vehicles and thrown them, and he hit things with logs, and he climbed the Empire State Building. So all of those things indicate his enormous power to grasp and smash. But there's another special attack. King Kong has the best natural targeting computer in the world. Remember that you with binocular vision have 2 eyes that are offset from one another to spot objects in 3-dimensional space. And part of your primate brains and mine is the natural ability to calculate from the offset location of each eye where an object is in 3-dimensional space. I can't do this as much because my left eye is effectively blind. So, what does King Kong do? Well, he has a much bigger brain than any of us. So, when he picks up objects, like buses, he can throw them with great accuracy. Kong can throw big boulders, he can throw trees, and he's very accurate with what he throws. So in addition to his enormous power to grasp and smash, he has the ability to throw huge objects at his target and hit his target. So those are his special attacks. That's A, 1 and 2. Now B, 1 and 2, Kong's special defenses. Well, he has a thick hide and immense size. Now, in the original Kong, Kong is 30 to 50 feet tall. In the Godzilla verse, they made him even larger so that he was a fair competitor to Godzilla. But either way, Kong's a big one. And he's got thick gorilla hide. Now, compared to human flesh, gorilla hide is leathery and thick. So, you can try to spear him, cut him, and you might not get through his flesh because his skin is like leather armor. And he's so big that human bullets are by comparison itty-bitty tiny. If you know anything about shooting, you know that you use different bullets for different goals. So you get a 22 caliber plinking rifle, a target rifle. And if you want to use it against rats or against birds, you can do that. Little tiny bullet, little tiny target will do the job you need to. But if you try using a 22 against a human being or a deer or something bigger, you're going to have to hit in the right spot. Now, you can kill a person with a 22. I don't want to take a 22 round, but if it goes through my eye, it probably won't pierce my skull. So it'll just bounce around inside my head until the momentum stops. Oh, that's where my brain is. So that would be a problem. I would probably die sooner or later. And if you hit me straight through the heart with a 22 caliber bullet, I will probably die. Or in an artery, I'll have arterial bleeding and die. But in general terms, you probably want a bigger bullet. So instead of a 22 caliber, you get a 38 caliber, 380 or 30-30. Basically, a big 32 caliber bullet with a 32 caliber, big 30 caliber bullet. And with a big 30 caliber bullet, you can knock down a man. You might kill him, you might wound him, you might just take all the air out of him. But it's a bigger bullet. What that bigger bullet means is you're hit with more force. It's more trauma to the body. And so in warfare, we use bigger bullets on people than we use on rats because people are bigger. And if you're going after an elephant, they have what is called, you're going to love this, an elephant gun. And the elephant gun fires a bullet that's about a ½ inch in diameter, a 50 caliber bullet, or even bigger. So you've got a ½ inch bullet hitting the elephant, and it's got a huge amount of charge. It's going to go really fast. Why? Elephants are big, and like gorillas, they have big, heavy, thick, leathery skin. So if you're going to be elephant hunting, which used to be a thing, to get their ivory because it's valuable, which is now very, very illegal, don't say your history teacher told you to go elephant hunting for ivory in Africa because that would make you a smuggler, and that would make me a conspiracy in your smuggling. So we don't want that. Poaching is bad. But back in the day, when you went elephant hunting for ivory, you'd use a gigantor gun, and you'd have these ridiculously long bullets with a very, very thick diameter because it's a big animal. And you think about what you need to hit and damage Kong. So, do you see how the logic of the argument, the thesis, Kong's characteristics and special attacks, enormous power to grasp and smash, the power to throw things, his big, thick skin and body. Oh, and what's the other thing? The other thing is the B, the 1B2, is he's highly mobile and he's very quick-witted. Again, big brain Kong. So he can jump, he can run, he can swing, he can go ooh-ah. So now we go to Godzilla's characteristics. It's the most dangerous attack. The second major argument is Godzilla's characteristics. So we go A, Godzilla's special attacks. Well, Godzilla has titanic strength to grasp and smash. He's much bigger than Kong in the official canon. And so when he walks into Tokyo, he can do things like stumble and knock a building down with his hips by accident because he's Godzilla. He's as tall as a medium-sized skyscraper. He can swing around and his tail can cut a building out from under it and cause it to collapse because he's Godzilla. He's not satisfied with knocking over subway cars off its tracks. He'll pick up a whole train, put it in his mouth, and because he's Godzilla. So he's got titanic strength to grasp and smash. Also, Godzilla at distance doesn't have to throw things. Why? Radioactive death breath. He blows radioactive death breath that turns tanks into powder. He can disintegrate objects with his radioactive death breath. Now, that's worse than our morning breath. Yes, it's Monday morning. We got up, we brushed our teeth and gargled and do whatever we did. But even if we hadn't, the most that would happen is somebody would say, ooh, you have a nasty case of halitosis today, which is the medical term for bad breath. But with Godzilla, you wouldn't survive to complain because you'd be ash. That's much better than throwing things. Now, what are his special defenses, Godzilla's? Well, he's got armored hide, and he's gargantuan-sized. He's 100 to 500 feet tall, depending upon which Godzilla movie you're talking about. Now, his armor plate is thicker than a battleship's. So if you shoot guns at him, they probably will bounce off. The shells will, unless they're big battleship guns. But he also has, on his B2, environmental adaptability. Godzilla goes to sleep in volcanoes. He flies through space and doesn't die. He goes to sleep in icebergs. Okay, he can handle a variety of hostile environments. Why? Why can you blow holes in him with giant missiles and battleships and he still comes back? In 2000, in the documentary film Godzilla 2000, they identified a genetic tracer called Regenerator G1, which causes him to almost immediately heal. So you blow a hole in his belly and suddenly it heals so quickly that he doesn't really lose too much time over it. So if you have this regenerative power, here's my conclusion. It's a restatement of my thesis. While King Kong is the king of the giant man destroying monsters, Godzilla is the emperor. He is much more powerful than Kong. And that's my essay. The same structure should be used by you when you write your essay. Any questions? Okay. So, end of Roman Empire stuff. Let's look at terms, which is item 18 in your notes. It's under threats. It's on the page right before the pictures start. So, what are some terms that are important? Let's go through and see if there's any. Okay, barbarian, person who babbles, doesn't speak Greek or Latin. Parthian is a person in the Eastern Empire during the times of Alexander the Great to the crisis of the 3rd century. A German is a tribesman from Germany. A Persian is somebody who rules the Eastern Empire during and after the crisis of the 3rd century. A Goth is a Swedish super German. Huns are Asiatic tribesmen. Attila is king of the Huns. Ah! Important religious figure. Important religious figure is Saint Augustine, write this down, of Hippo Regius. Okay, St. Augustine of Hippo Regius is a Christian leader. Now, he starts out as a Zoroastrian, as a follower of Manichaeism, Lord of Light, Lord of Dark, that sort of thing. But in his Meditations, a book about St. Augustine's conversion to Christianity, he grows up and becomes a Christian. And Augustine writes a book that's going to help people loyal to Rome adapt to the changing world. It's called The City of God. And in Augustine's book, The City of God, which is written in the early 400s, he says that the city of man, Rome, may seem eternal, but it's not. Everything made by man is mortal. So Rome will fall, maybe really soon. He was writing around the time Alaric the Goth sacked Rome. What we should focus on is the city of God, the eternal things. We should be Christians more than Romans. Otherwise, when Rome falls, we'll be dragged down. But if we put our prime loyalty to and focus upon Christ and the city of God, which is eternal, we can survive any calamity or crisis, even the fall of Roman civilization. And that is true enough to be one of the major books that makes the Middle Ages possible. Intellectual Christians don't go, ah! and give up. City of God and the example of Christ are both things that help Christians to adapt to literally the end of the known world and the rise of a dark age. Augustine is killed by the Vandals when they take Hippo Regius. So he's actually killed by the barbarians, by Gaiseric and his Vandals. Hyperinflation, intense specialization. Intense specialization is a bad thing evolutionarily and socially. So today, if you want to get a degree in history and you want to get a master's or a PhD, you've got to do a thesis on something that is probably going to be so small, like the effect of George Washington's tooth powder on his character, which affected his ability to fight the Revolutionary Army and beat the British. His tooth powder! Well, and he ended up getting wooden teeth. That's a minor thing. But we have scholars devoting themselves to minor things because the assumption is all the big things have been taken. It's like the scientific answer, oh, why should I become an inventor? All the good things have been invented, which is nonsense. Of course there are inventions we haven't invented yet. Lots of them. We just haven't thought of them yet, or thought of a way to make them reality yet. What a pessimistic outlook. All the inventions have been invented yet. Well, in Rome, because they've been a civilization for so long, instead of being a stone worker, you hyper specialize as a sculptor. And when things become more basic, when civilization breaks down, you got problems because you need stonecutters more than sculptors. So intense specialization is something we suffer from. It's something the Romans suffer from. And evolutionarily, when things change, hyper-specialized people tend to fail. The Cairo, you know, a martyr is somebody who dies for their faith. People sold themselves into slavery to avoid the tax man. You know what zealots are, anti-Roman Jewish terrorists. Ah, lead! Lead, 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 lead. When you think of Rome, you think of waterworks, you think of aqueducts, and you think of pipes, public toilets, public baths, and sewers. But what will join the pipes made of clay? They use lead, lead, soldering lead. What do we know of lead? We know that lead can make you kind of stupid after a while. We know of lead because it might have led to Rome's failures. Think about this. Oh God, you must have been really bad in a previous life to have me sing at you. Here's why. Lead. What do we know that lead does if you consume a lot of it in your food and drink? It can kill you, and it disrupts your nervous system's ability to transmit information. Now, your brain is a big nervous system organ that transmits information. And if you're not transmitting information as effectively, you become kind of dumb, stupid, STOOPID. And for over 500 years, people in Roman cities have been drinking all of their water from lead soldered piping. Over time, it is believed that the average ability of Romans to think and act effectively is degraded because of this.
So the emperors didn't just like go downhill naturally. It was because of the lead.
In part, yeah. If you wonder why can't the Romans breed more? Golly, they have all the advantages. They have a civilization, and yet their birth rate is static or declining. Well, lead. Lead poisoning might make them less aggressive, less able, less willing to be a parent. And why can't the Romans figure out solutions to these problems of the empire? Well, lead poisoning really could have affected them. Now, we don't know this for sure, but we think this. We have analyzed bones. We have analyzed the pipes. It's extremely likely that not the contributing factor to the fall of Rome was the fact that it had all these wonderful waterworks, but it used lead as soldering in its pipes. And only in the mid-20th century did we discover about lead poisoning. So in a lot of buildings, the pipes in early 20th century American buildings used lead soldering. Why? Lead is easy to work with. Lead has a low melting point. So because of this, in the late 20th century, all the old buildings had to have their piping replaced. Because otherwise, and not just the piping, lead paint. You know what babies do when they see paint chips? They do what they do with everything. They put it in their mouth and they suck on it and maybe they eat it. Lead paint chips cause neurological damage to American babies. So we had to strip out all the lead paint in all of our buildings and replace it with non-lead based paint. That's amazing. Now, why did we use lead-based paint? Because it has a low melting temperature and it covers really well. It's like asbestos. I assume these are asbestos tiles. Asbestos is fire retardant. It's also highly cancerous. If you leave it alone, it'll leave you alone. But if you mess with it, and there's a lot of asbestos fibers in the air, it will increase your chances of getting lung cancer. So, in any case, there's that. Now, there is item 20, number 1, the Battle of Adrianople. Now, the Battle of Adrianople. Okay, so Adrianople is northwest of Constantinople. I think it's 40 miles away or so. It's not that far. Adrianople, maybe 50 miles. It's less than 100. So Adrianople is in that little swatch of land that is Turkish today, where Constantinople is. It's Turkey and Europe. Here's what happens. Okay. So this happens in the late 300s, early 400s. The Goths beg to come into the Roman Empire. They beg. Beg, 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 beg. And the Romans say, well, if you come in and learn Latin and live like Romans, we will let you come in. And the Goths, who are German, say, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So, Battle of Adrianople is August 9th in the year of our Lord, 378. So, August 9th, 378. So the Germans and the Goths are led into the lower Danube region, south of the Danube River, and north of Constantinople. And the Eastern Emperor Valens sends representatives of his imperial government to the Gothic camp. And these guys are morons. They're like school teachers. No, no, no. We don't do things like that. We do things like this. And he's doing this to the frickin' Goths, who are proud and who had to swallow their pride to climb into Rome's territory in the first place. But now the Romans are treating them like children. No, no, we're going to re-educate you. Really? You're going to re-educate us, the Goths. And eventually the Goths say, the hell with this, and they kill Valens's representatives. Dead. And they, I think, send body parts to Valens to let him know, the Eastern Roman Emperor, we're not putting up with your guff anymore. So Valens takes a field army from Constantinople to Adrianople. And he's going to learn those Barbies a lesson, barbarians. But this is the first time it's a really important factor. Do you know, can you guess what the Goths have on their horses that the Romans don't? They have stirrups. And having stirrups, they can stand up in their saddle and lance the Romans and spear the Romans, and they're much more secure. They have stirrups. Valens is killed. The field army is destroyed. And the only reason the Goths don't take Constantinople is the walls. So from that point, Valens' successor needs to accept the reality that within the empire are tribes, at least at times, that are more powerful than Rome. And it's under that shadow. Remember Theodosius the Great, who unifies the empire and gives his sons Arcadius and Honorius the empire, and how they're kind of weak? This is why they're kind of weak. Because they know that the Goths beat them. And the Goths might beat them again. And so instead of treating the Goths like citizens or subjects, they treat the Goths like equal allies within their territory. And the Goths wander around and do whatever the hell they want. And the Romans in the east pay them off. And the Romans in the West try to pay them off, and then they fight them, and then there are all these problems. The Battle of Adrianople is a key turning point battle in history, because from that moment, the Romans know at least the possibility that even under the best of circumstances, a fight within their empire, among their fortifications, with their emperor and a major field army, first-class field army, they might still lose. And this is going to make them gun-shy. This is going to make them much more cautious with the barbarians. And ultimately, it's going to change the relationship of the barbarians to the Romans, and that is going to lead to the Roman Empire in the West being carved up by the barbarians. Now, what's another reason why the Romans might have fallen? Well, there's plague and lead poisoning. There's invading barbarians. We talked about those. Plague limits their population. Lead poisoning keeps it low. There's this. The barbarians are a rising people. They are willing to fight and kill and die to get what they want. The Romans are, by this point, even though they're Christian, they're a decadent people. Decadent people tend to not be willing to fight and die because they've had it all. They've been rich for so long, they're not really afraid. It's like they're in a hot bath. They're enervated. They're sort of, it's not that bad. Why get too upset? So they beat our army in the field at Adrianople. We're still Romans. It'll still be all right. Just relax and pass me a drink. The barbarians would never do that. If you fought them and beat them, they would either make peace with you or they'd move heaven and earth to fight again and beat you. There's a degree of aggression that the barbarians have that the Romans lack. There's a degree of commitment. And a lot of this is because the Romans have had it so good for so long that they are enervated. Semi-finally, the taxes that Diocletian increases and that stay high throughout the rest of the empire, that are so bad that people sell themselves into slavery to avoid it, after a while people go, what the hell are we getting for these taxes? We live in barracks. We're micromanaged by bureaucrats. Life's not fun. Life's not exciting. Life's not good. Life is a giant chore. It is a misery. We hope for heaven because the world sucks and blows. It inhales and exhales. It respires. We want better. And when the barbarians take over an area, these taxes end. And the barbarians are cruel and crude, but once you figure out how to deal with them, you can live with them. A lot of Romans actually calculate that it's better when the empire falls in their area because at least they don't have to pay those ridiculous taxes anymore. Because they're not being regulated to death by wage and price controls and you've got to do what your father does and all these other laws. The barbarians leave us alone. Yeah, we got to grow food for them. Yeah, when they come by, we got to be respectful. But they leave us alone. The Romans never leave you alone. They interfere. They meddle. So, for a lot of Romans, it actually paradoxically was better when the barbarians finally took over. At least it's done. At least the fight. Oh God! At least we don't have to pay those terrible taxes anymore. It's also possible that there is a time for all seasons. And it was time, after 1,200 years plus of Rome, that Rome had given the world what it can. And it was time for something else to take its place and give what it could. And the Germanic kingdoms that set up after Rome in the Western Empire, they all offer something different and something new. And in some cases, something better. Now, there was a massive loss of population when the Roman Empire falls. The barbarian kingdoms simply could not maintain the number of people that Rome had. I'm not saying it wasn't horrific. Augustine had to write a book desperately focusing on God because the city of man was dying in front of him. And he was a thoughtful enough man to know it. But it's possible that simply there wasn't enough in the Roman model to inspire people to do bold, great things anymore. We know what Rome is. We want to try something new. There is a need for human beings to contribute with creativity. And if this is the great problem with anyone's utopia. Let's say one of us has a really good idea of what utopia is, and we make it happen. Well, what is there for people to do other than live in it? There's no innovation because it's already perfect. There's no struggle because it's already perfect. There's no change because it's already perfect. And in a world like that, humanity dies. I think people would overthrow utopia just because they're bored. So it is possible that the Romans had played out. Do any of you have any thoughts? We've got the lead, we've got the barbarians and their mercenaries, we've got the population problems, we've got the Battle of Adrianople, we've got decadence. Any thoughts on your part as to why Rome falls? The empire, not the republic. Yeah.
I feel like it also maybe could have been, like, even though Christianity united Rome, it might have, like, broken it apart, because at that point, the way Christianity had spread, like, it was like a binding force, but when everyone's binded by the same force, it kind of falls apart as, like, a way it was binding people together.
I get what you're saying. I think I get what you're saying. And if I understand what you're saying, you agree with the great historian Edward Gibbon, who wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Gibbon said that Christianity weakened the empire. In part because to be an empire, you got to kick ass. But you've got to kick butt. You've got to be willing to punch and kill and intimidate and scare the bejesus out of people. And Romans were good at that. And people stayed in line because they were afraid of getting their posteriors kicked by Rome. If you're Christian, even if you're trying to be a Christian soldier, the viciousness of the Roman wolfmen was decreased. And without a willingness to rip somebody to shreds for defiance, why should anyone obey you? And Christianity, I mean, the message in the City of God is take away from Rome and give to the church. Take away from the emperors and give to Christ. And so there was that too. So yeah, Gibbon thought Christianity was a major cause of the fall. Tomorrow you have the exam on the Roman Empire. If you've been here and paying attention, you should do fine. One of the reasons I did this video is to make sure that people at home had the opportunity to see it. Any questions, comments, or thoughts before we're done? Is that a question? No? Okay. And we're done. Thank you. Come again.